empowering your financial future. We're getting to the close to the end here, right? So how you make informed decisions uh, that match your personal goals. So this is very, very important. If you're going to invest in real estate or anything, you really need to understand what you're investing in. It's not enough to just say, hey, I know real estate makes millions of dollars. Let me just go put some money into it. You need to understand how to do some basic due diligence. Okay. You need to understand what markets you might want to invest in and why. So maybe you like to invest locally close to you where you can keep an eye on that property. Maybe you just want to invest in really hot markets. Maybe you want to invest in the Sun Belt, which is really hot right now, but that's not where you live. Um, but maybe that's what you want. Or maybe you want to invest in places that you like to go visit so that you can write it off as a business expense when you go visit those places, right? There's all sorts of reasons why you might pick one market over another, but there are also a lot of financial reasons, whether you're looking for higher cash flow or higher equity, things like that. So you need to think about the markets and what kind of assets are you attracted to? Is it apartment buildings? Is it mobile home parks? Do you like new construction? New construction can be very lucrative, but it might be a bit more risky. So the returns are going to be different in all these different asset classes. So you need to understand what your choices are. And then teams. Teams is very important. We talked about those general partners. That team is going to dictate everything. So you need to make sure that they are a solid team because they could have a great asset in a great market and not do so well with it if they're not a good team. Or a really bang up team can take a bad asset in a bad market and still do wonderful things with it. So you want to vet things like, find out how many deals they have taken full cycle, meaning they've purchased it, they've managed it, and they sold it, and see what returns they got for their investors when they did that. How many assets do they have under management? Do their strategies align with your strategies? What's their communication style? There's so many things you can ask them. And I have a whole long list of things you can ask them, and you should ask them. So reach out to me if you want that list. I'll happily share it with you. And then the most important thing is for you to understand your investment goals. And some people, they have no idea what their investment goals are. They're like, I just know I want to make more money. Isn't that a goal? Well, yeah, it is. But when do you want to make that money? How do you want to make that money? Right? So are you looking for cash flow or are you looking for equity? Yes, there are deals where you're going to get both, but you usually got to get more of one or the other. You're either going to get more money now, cash flow coming to you right now, but very little equity on the end, or you're going to get less cash flow now, maybe no cash flow now, and tons of equity on the end. New construction, you're not getting any money right now. It's all about when it sells. So, or when it's completed and you get a new loan on it and you get refinance proceeds, all those kinds of things. How long are you willing to part with your money? 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, 10 years? You need to know that. What's your risk tolerance? I mentioned new construction can be very lucrative, and you can knock it out of the park and make a lot of money on that. But you might not make any money on it if something goes wrong during construction, right? So versus buying something that's existing property, has a 12-year track record of making a certain percentage every year, you have more an idea of where you're going. So you need to think about that. Are you building a nest egg for your retirement, investing for your children? Are you putting together a college fund? Do you want to exit your job early? Or maybe you just want to supplement your current income. These are all things you need to think about. And yeah, they're going to affect what types of investments you get into. And I can help you navigate those if you want. The free book that you hopefully downloaded, it has a whole section on this. Things to think about and how it affects which markets and assets you might want to pick. So give a look-see in that chapter and try to get your investment goals straightened out. All right. We've decided on our goals. We've decided where we want to invest. Now, how do we actually do that? So syndications come in two different formats. You'll hear them referred to as 506B offerings or opportunities and 506Cs, okay? These are exemptions under the Regulation D of the Securities Act because what you are buying is a security, okay? So these are exceptions to having to do all the registration requirements that the IRS generally has for securities, which can take years. And real estate purchases can't take years. And they're very costly because you need lawyers to draft up all these papers. So this is how syndications back in the day used to be done. It had to go through all this rigmarole, and why it was really only the ultra rich that ever got into those big deals, because they took so long and they're so expensive to set up that you just had to have millions of dollars to invest in those kinds of things. But that's no longer the case because, again, that Job Act of 2017, um, Tax Cut and Job Act, came up with these exemptions. So within these two exemptions, you can now invest in syndication. So 506C exemption says if you're an accredited investor, you can invest in these. So we'll talk about what an accredited investor is in just a minute, but 506C offerings are only available to accredited investors. And these are offerings that can be advertised. You can see them on the billboard, on a blimp, you can see them on Facebook, that kind of stuff. And if you're accredited, you can go ahead and invest. And whoever's issuing that syndication, that offering, they have to verify that you are indeed accredited before they allow you to invest. But somebody said, hey, not everybody can be an accredited investor. I have friends and family that want to invest in things and they should be allowed to do that. So he came up with a 506B offering. And so these are available to both sophisticated and accredited investors. And we will define what both of those things are. But you can have 35 sophisticated investors and an unlimited number of accredited investors in 506B offerings. But here's the key. They have to have a pre-existing relationship with a general partner or a fund manager involved in that syndication. And they cannot advertise that, not a general solicitation anyway. So you're only going to know that these are out there if you have that pre-existing relationship. So how do you get that pre-existing relationship? Well, it could be a friend or family member, but it could also be someone you met at a conference, somebody you met at a meetup, on a workshop, and somebody you set up a call with. So I always tell people, if there's syndicators you like, teams you like, set up a call with them. It costs you nothing, and it is super important to just start establishing that pre-existing relationship, and then sign up for their email list, their investor clubs, and get involved with them so you can have that pre-existing relationship. And if you're not signed up for those emails or in their investor clubs, then they can't share with you these kinds of offerings, right? You won't ever know they exist because they can't be advertised. But if you've established that relationship, then they can send you those offerings and you can be made aware of them. Even if you're not going to invest in them, you can start looking at them, right? See if it's of interest. So what is an accredited investor? What is a sophisticated investor? So accredited, this is basically based on your income or your net worth. So if your income is $200,000 or more, or $300,000 jointly with a spouse, congratulations, you're an accredited investor. That's all there is to it. If you don't qualify that way, you can qualify if you have a net worth greater than $1 million, excluding your personal home. Okay. So if you meet one of those, hey, you're an accredited investor. You just need a letter from your CPA that says that you qualify in that manner, or you have to show some tax statements or whatever. There are various ways of verifying that accreditation, but that's all you need to be an accredited investor. Sophisticated investor, you have to show, so basically this is anybody who's not accredited, but can show that they have a basic understanding of commercial real estate. They know what they're talking about. When we talk about markets, when we talk about assets, you know what those things are. You've taken courses like this, you've read some books, you've done some YouTubes, podcasting, whatever it is to educate yourself. You can become a accredited, non-accredited investor, but sophisticated. But remember, for 506B offerings, you are going to have that pre-existing relationship in order to get into those, and you do not qualify for the 506Cs. One is not better than the other as far as the returns. They'll usually make very similar amounts. The syndicators and general partners, they don't pick one or the other based on what the return on investment is going to be. They have all sorts of other reasons why they'll choose one or the other. They can even start as one and switch over to the other. This gets all sorts of complicated, but don't think you're going to make less because something is a 506B. That's not the case. We're going to skip over this because this is running a little bit late, but basically this is just how I got into this role. I was basically investing for myself. A lot of friends and family started seeing what I was doing, I was making money, and started asking me to help them invest. And I was basically doing this for my son and for my family. And then I've realized I could help a lot of other people. So, but I'm going to share, spare you from that whole story of how that happened. But if anyone wants to know, happy to share it offline. Um, but how can you start? If this is something that does interest you, how can you get started in this? One of the first questions I always get is, how much money do I need to start? Like, I almost sound embarrassed to ask. Like, this is a very logical question. Of course, you need that. So, yes, these are multi-million dollar um, real estate assets that we're purchasing, but you don't need to have that. Remember, the bank is the biggest partner, so you don't need millions. If you're investing single family homes now, you don't even need as much as you would for a down payment for one of those. Many of them, the baseline investment is only $25,000, or at least I see a lot that fall into that category. There'll be some that are $50,000 baselines. There's a lot that are 100,000. There are some that are a million. I mean, they are all over the place, but it is not difficult to find something where you can get in at 25. Um, Even if they say the baseline is 50,000, a lot of times you can talk to the sponsor and they can get you in for less, especially if it's a fund. They can be rather flexible. Okay. Where do you find the money to start? So in my case, I sold off some single family homes in order to get into multifamily, but that is not what everybody has. And we also, if you have retirement funds, you need to have an IRA custodian to do that, to do self-directed. So that's one way to start. But the first place to look is for lazy money. What is lazy money? I consider anything in a savings account, CD, or money market to be lazy because it's making less money than inflation is. Okay. So I hear people all excited now. They're like, "Ooh, I'm getting 3%, 4%, even 5% on some of these things." And they're like, "I'm finally making money." You're not making money. You're losing less money than you were before, but you're not making money because inflation right now, and it depends where you are in this country, but it's going to be somewhere between 7 and 10% right now. So you are still losing money if you're only making 4 or 5% on your money. You're losing the difference there, right? Because yeah, so that's the first money you want to get invested because you need to be making more than inflation at least. All right, stock accounts. If you're not happy with how they are performing, leave enough in there for an emergency fund and divert the rest into real estate. Okay. How much should you have an emergency fund? And this is because real estate is not liquid. You can't pull it out fast, but stocks are. And stocks are not bad. I have a lot of money in stocks, but I have most of it in real estate. But I like to have an emergency fund where I can pull out liquid funds at any time. And so a lot of people say your emergency fund should be equal to 3 months worth of your living expenses. I think that's too low. I usually aim for at least 6 months. So I leave that in stocks or other liquid places. And then I put the rest into real estate. But that is up to you. But that is another place where you can go look for money. Retirement accounts, already mentioned those. Great place to invest. This is what I'm going to caution you about. This, I left it in here because if interest rates go back down, which the Feds have said they're going to start lowering those rates, um, this might become a viable option again. I don't think it is right now, but a couple of years ago, this was a great way to get into this kind of stuff. I knew a guy who was he had a line of credit, a business line of credit, where he could pull up to $500,000 at a time. And he was borrowing that money at 3%. And then he was investing it in real estate deals that were making between 12 and 20%. That's a no-brainer. You're paying 3% to borrow the money. You're making, I think he was averaging 15%. No-brainer. Absolute no-brainer. He's making tons of money on money that isn't even his. It's basically what banks do, right? They take your money and they lend it to somebody else and they collect the difference in between. So he was basically being a bank with the bank's money, whatever. Right now, if you want to get a home equity line of credit or something like that, it's probably going to be somewhere between 7 and 9% interest. I'm just guessing. I haven't looked at them lately. But even if you are making 12 to 20% on that and you're like, well, there's still a spread in there. Remember, real estate grows in value over time. So you may hear the average return on something is, say, 15%, but that's average. It might be 4% at the beginning and 30% at the end, right? So you don't you're not necessarily going to get the same amount of money throughout the time. And so if your loan payments are higher than what you're receiving at a particular time, you might end up in trouble there. So be very, very careful when it comes to taking loans to invest. If interest rates drop and you can lock those rates in, it could be a great way to do it. Or if you happen to have some um, good loans that I'm not aware of, maybe that's a good. Oh, and also look at the loan term. Do you have to pay that back in 3 years, and your whole period on this other thing is 5 years? Bad idea, right? So be careful there. And 1031 exchanges. We already talked about that, but that's a great source also for getting started in this. So if you're going to start doing this, the first thing you need to do is educate yourself. That's how you become a sophisticated investor. And it's also a good idea, even if you are an accredited investor. How do you do that? There are about 1 million podcasts out there on this subject right now. So there's tons of podcasts, lots of YouTube channels. Every syndicator, every capital allocator, they're going to have podcasts on this. I have it, YouTube channels, all that kind of stuff. They're going to have lots of free information on their websites. There's going to be books, and there's so much free information these days. There's no excuse to not get educated on this, and it doesn't take as much time as you think. Connect with syndicators, connect with capital allocators, and set up a call with them. You have to establish that pre-existing relationship, but it's also a great way to get all your questions answered. And on these calls, there's never a pressure to invest in anything. They can't offer you an investment opportunity on those initial calls. They can't even do it. So don't worry about that. Join those investor clubs. That will let you start seeing offerings so you know what other questions to ask. Because sometimes you don't know what questions to ask until you've seen some things, right? So start seeing those. And I know on my website, and I'm sure others have this too, I have previous deals that have passed that you can review. There are videos that go through them that explain a lot of the terminology and stuff. So there's absolutely no pressure to invest there because these deals don't exist anymore. They've already closed, right? So you can look at things like that. And then you make your first investment and you learn from that, and then you rinse and repeat. So just so you kind of know what some of these look like, here's one we did earlier this year called Stony Creek Highlands. This was a Class A property, very nice, 278 unit property that was built in 2008 and was just being repositioned. So it was almost a $47 million purchase. And you see here what the returns were. The average cash on cash, 7 to 8%, internal rate of return, 16 to 17%. And you're multiplying your investments 2.7 to 2.8 times through this whole period of 5 to 7 years. Okay. If you don't know what some of those terms are, internal rate of return, equity multiple, cash on cash, these are the types of questions you need to start learning. These are the types of things my book explains. So sometimes, like I said, until you start reviewing offers, you don't even know what questions to ask. So here's another one. This one actually says what the baseline investment is. The other one didn't mention that. It also mentions your AAR. What's that? That's your average annualized return. Okay. So that's a little different than an IRR. So you see the terminology. You need to learn these terminologies. They're not difficult, I swear. This talks about a hurdle. What the heck's a hurdle? I can explain all that kind of stuff to you. So, but this one's doing cost segregation and bonus depreciation. So it talks about all of that kind of stuff. So these are the kind of examples you'll see on the websites. Lots of people are going to offer these kinds of things. Another great way to learn is for you ladies out there is the Sheroes group. This is my Facebook group. I just kicked this off, so it's fairly new. We don't have a ton of members in there yet, but please join us. This is just for ladies to get together and talk about real estate investing, ask all your questions, talk about juggling a career and family and investing, and all the things that go along with that. We're going to have lots of interviews with experts in this field, and just talk about all the things that go through your mind when looking to analyze your first deals or your next deal. So join us here. It's a lot of fun, and we encourage all our members to pick a superhero avatar. and we can tell you how to get an avatar made up of you and post a picture of that in there. That's just for fun, just for fun. So feel free to join us there. Connect with me on all the social media platforms. Check out my website. Again, I'm happy to talk to you about anything. My website is full of free resources. I truly get the juggling us women do, and I'm so happy to help any of you in any aspects of your life that I can help you navigate. But real estate investing is my forte, so that is the one that I'm most able to help you with. But yeah, that never-ending to-do list, I get it. And so this is the easy button when it comes to investing. So happy to take any questions. After this, we'll stop the recording and let you hit me with whatever questions you want. And yeah, hit me up on LinkedIn, Facebook. I'll see you there as well. And it's been a pleasure. Thank you for spending time with me.